When I went to the nursery and I happened to see this Mugo pine that has very small foliage, pretty much the first one I looked at, I saw the trunk line and figured, you know what, this might be an easy, you know, nursery stock to bonsai in one day type of video. So I'm gonna start cutting some of this stuff off, kind of just style this as fast as I possibly can, and we're gonna see what happens today. So, what's it gonna end up looking like? Let's find out. All right, so to start off, I guess it makes sense to talk about the idea I have. So this looks like it's gonna be the front of the tree. I'm gonna tilt it a little bit like that, and then we can get a first branch off of here, and then maybe some kind of, you know, secondary apex here, a primary apex here, style this as a first branch, or maybe not, maybe keep it even more compact, and wire some of these down. So, you know, not really a difficult project. Pretty much I'm just going to cut everything off, wire this up, and see where we can position them. So I'm going to get started with that today. Alright, so eventually I decided to do a 180 and completely change the styling of this tree halfway through the video. However, right now I'm styling it as an informal upright tree. Now, most of my trees are either formal or informal upright, so there wasn't really a whole lot of, you know, change to my collection with this if it was another informal upright tree. Also, I think Mugo pine is better suited to be a cascade. It naturally has kind of a more horizontal growth habit to it, or at least a lot of the cultivars of Mugo pine have a horizontal growth habit, so it was much better to utilize that instead of the informal upright style in this particular case. Alright, so we have kind of a first branch going off to the right side, then I'm styling this secondary branch, and then once I get that into position, I think, okay, I'm just going to cut off the rest of the foliage, do a little bit of wiring on the apex, and we'll be good to go. But as I went on, I figured, you know what? I don't really like the way this style is going, so I decided to just flip it and do something completely different. Now, thankfully, a lot of the wiring of this tree translated pretty well into a semi-cascade from an informal upright. And I know they're really not that too different of a style, like we're still following the same angle, I just had to refine the placement of the branches a little bit. So there was the original style, and then here we go, we flip it 180, and then we have this tree on the left side that's kind of a semi-cascade, and then the branch on the right side. So eventually what I decide to do is refine the left side into a triangular shape, and then what I'm going to do is cut off all of the needles on that second trunk on the right. I'm going to wire it, twist it up, and just turn that into a interesting deadwood feature, or as interesting of a deadwood feature as I can make it. So the process here is relatively simple. All I do is I twist up that branch with some wire, I remove all the needles, and then I later go back and I remove all the bark. So here's what the Mugo pine looks like the first day after I styled it. Now what I'm going to do is bring it in on the second day, get some good light going, and then refine some of this dead wood. So I'm just going to peel off the rest of the bark, and then I'm going to do my best to place these branches in a way that looks, well, aesthetic. So I trim them back. What I wanted to do is trim them back to just 2 branches, because in this Mugo pine we had a lot of scenarios where there's 3 branches growing out of the same point, and that kind of leads to inverse taper and just doesn't look really good, and then it's a little bit difficult to make a good looking foliage pad out of that, and you get overcrowding eventually. So I trimmed it back to 2. I trimmed the growth point on a lot of these, so that should also encourage back budding. And then the last kind of minor issue we had is that the apex is only 1 branch, so I kind of styled the apex as rounded as I could make it, and then hopefully in the future that back buds and we get kind of a more rounded apex going. However, I think for what this is, you know, $40 nursery stock, I think I did the best I could. I'm satisfied with the way it turned out. It does need a little bit more refinement, and I think we can drop some of those branches down a little bit further to get a more semi-cascade look, or even try and grow one of those much longer than the other one. But that's it for right now, and I would love to repot this on a rock, and I have one that follows a very similar angle. It's going to be, you know, a small triangular rock. However, I don't want to repot any conifers in the middle of summer because that tends to not go well, stresses their roots out a lot. Of course, the deadwood also needs to be refined, so I'm going to have to finish this project a little bit later on. Right now, it's just going to sit on the patio and recover, but hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully it gives you some inspiration for something you can do. So there we go, $40 bonsai Mugo pine.